Howdy, boys and girls. Let's see if I remember how to do this. Welcome back to Season 9. That's Season 9 of the Carla and Crappy Show. My name is Uncle Crappy. That over the other person on the screen over there, we're used to doing this. We've been doing this for 9 years.
Yes,
but
we have been.
Now everybody else on the entire planet is used to Zoom calls and video chats and all that stuff. Guys, this is Carla. This is the Carla of the Carla and Crappy Show. How you doing?
I'm okay. How are you? We were just talking pre-show about how much I appreciate jumping on a Zoom call and not having to lead a PowerPoint presentation. So,
and we can do that. We're gonna do at some point this season. We'll do an all PowerPoint Carla and Crappy Show. It'll be riveting. It'll be spectacular.
But not as riveting as our new show open. I've got to give kudos to you for that. You sent that to me this afternoon. If you didn't watch the video, if you're listening to the show, go find us on YouTube and watch the open.
Yeah, go. That just occurred to me today once we confirmed that it's like, oh right, there's football games and we should probably do a show if we're going to do this. And it's like, oh, and then yeah, I need an opening, don't I? So we have. I was pleased with how that turned out.
My husband laughed out loud, and it's really hard to make him laugh. And I showed it to him, and he cackled. And so I'm like, okay.
That makes me so happy. That's very cool. And that's, I mean, the masks are that's the, I think the theme for the season is like, we have no idea. That's not that we don't have an idea what the theme is going to be. That is the theme. We have no idea.
Yeah.
We have no idea.
We usually have a show every year that's the I have no idea or we have no idea edition. And like this year, that's just like whole season.
It's the whole season because we don't know if this is going to be a whole season, and we don't know if there's going to be a playoff, and we don't know how any of this stuff is going to work. But you know, there are games, and because this is what we do, we should talk about them, right?
We should. Even if we know nothing about any of these teams, but like you said earlier,
well, yeah,
it hasn't stopped us before. So
there is that. The pickings are kind of. I mean, the games are interesting, actually.
They are, yeah.
But you know, these are they're we're not looking at Power 5 conferences playing this weekend. But I mean, we will get to that stuff. One thing I did want to we did want to start with is that. Of course, because this is what he does. President Trump has inserted himself into this whole thing. There was a call today. We're taping this on Tuesday between President Trump and Kevin Warren, the new. I feel so sorry for this guy, the new commissioner of the Big Ten, about starting the season. I didn't realize that that President Trump was a Big Ten fan to this degree. And he later tweeted that a plan to bring back Big Ten football was on the 1 yard line. That's a quote. Carla, my question for you is like, which 1 yard line are we talking about? Because he did not make that clear.
That's a great question. Well, if you ask other people who are familiar with the conversation, I'm using air quotes if you're listening to this, they said, no, that's nowhere close. We're not even in the red zone yet. So maybe it is the other one. Maybe it is the standing
yards.
with the back against your end zone. But I don't know. I trust Pete Thamel a lot, and I went and I read his take on the whole thing, and he kind of outlined it. For the record, for full disclosure, Pete didn't work at Yahoo when I worked there, so he was hired after I was gone. So we were never coworkers or anything. But yeah, his take on it was, it looks like the Big Ten's kind of preparing for every possible scenario, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Sure. The idea of bringing football back right around Thanksgiving is intriguing, and I know that's something that a lot of people have angst over because it doesn't solve the potential playoff issue. That you wouldn't start the season early enough to get a Big Ten team potentially into the playoff because they'd only have played like 3 weeks before the playoff would be announced. But it ends the season earlier, and it solves that problem that we talked about in the first show together, their season opener, on the how do you play 2 football seasons in the same calendar year, and the toll that takes on the student athlete. So you start the season in November, you end the season. They were talking about possibly the early part of March with a faux Rose Bowl with the Pac-12, who might run the same schedule. And I don't know. That seems kind of plausible to me. It lessens the toll on the players, and and then if things aren't working out well, then the original plan right now is to start sometime in January. So no harm, no foul. You just push everything into January and just see what happens. I don't know. I don't think it's a bad idea to potentially prepare. Do I think it's going to happen? No, I don't, because I still think this whole thing's going to blow up in our faces in the next 4 to 5 weeks after we start getting, we start flying kids all over the country. And, we're already starting to see cases on campuses and small team outbreaks and those kinds of things. Like, I don't see this lasting long term. But it can't hurt to prepare just in case a miracle happens.
Sure.
Right?
Sure.
This is all posturing.
The November thing, I don't think is likely. I think you can accomplish all that stuff even starting in January. Say you do a division round robin Big Ten title game, do this in conjunction with the Pac-12 and have a Rose Bowl at the end of it. I think that would be a very cool thing. A lot of people watch it. I would watch the hell out of it. I absolutely. I think what's going on now is this is posturing by a president that who desperately needs wins in the geographic territory we're talking about here, because that's where the election's going to be won, and it actually puts him in an interesting position because if by some reason that this would happen, and the Big Ten would come back earlier than anyone expected, he can take credit for it. And if not, he can go back to his normal playbook, which is to claim that he's being played politics with, and he tried to do what was right for the people. And I'm sorry to sound so cynical, but that's what I see as the motivation here. Kevin Warren. If someone walks into Kevin Warren's office and says, "The president of the United States is on the phone," you got to take the call. I mean,
yeah.
you really need to, but I don't see it as much more than that. I come back in January, guys. That's fine. I will be happy to watch regardless. I usually get depressed about January when the season's ending, and it's like, oh God, there's no college football till August. So that would be welcome. That would be a welcome thing. One thing maybe this is clear. If there is a playoff, and we don't know that there's going to be a playoff because we have no idea. One thing is clear, that the Big Ten probably won't be part of it. But on the outside chance or inside chance that there's going to be a playoff, the time-honored traditions of sports podcasting require that we make predictions, even about things that may or may not happen. So, Carla, as we do on our first show every season, let's take a shot at picking what the final four would be. Do you want to go? You ready?
Sure. Yeah, I can go.
Do it.
Okay, so I'm going to just go ahead and name off the first two, because just like every other year in this show, my first two teams that I think are probably going to be in there are the two teams that we say every freaking year.
Every year.
And that would be Clemson and Alabama.
Yeah.
Clemson's playing an all ACC schedule. I mean, you might as well, if there's a playoff, put them in it right now. Like, the ACC is terrible except for Clemson. Clemson's going to be in Clemson's going to be in as long as we make it to a playoff.
Yes.
Alabama is interesting, but again, don't bet against a Saban with a chip on his shoulder. Right. We've learned that in the past, so that's why I put them in there. I'm giving them the benefit of the doubt. And let's be honest, Saban's done everything right during this pandemic. Like, he's managed this better than probably anybody in the country. Like him, despise him, whatever. He's done a nice job of managing this and keeping his players focused, but addressing everything that's going on in a way that has felt really responsible. I'm not going to bet against Saban as long as he's still the head coach at Alabama. So Alabama's in. The other two positions are really, really interesting. I go back to the conversation that we had at the end of last season when I made the mistake of saying I wanted a calmer season. And our wild predictions, you had the wild prediction that Texas A&M was going to win the SEC West, which was really intriguing, right?
Yeah.
And I saw it. Like, I was like, okay.
And horribly wrong, by the way, but yes.
Well, we didn't know that, and we still don't know, but like it still could happen.
Yes.
It's a, there's a lot of unknowns about Alabama, and
Sure.
and so I went through the SEC West. Like LSU is really interesting this year. I mean, we joked during the NFL draft that like they like the entire team got drafted, and maybe some basketball players too. But at the same
and
time,
they're all playing in the NFL in the state of Ohio, which is going to be awesome.
yeah, so they're all playing in Ohio. But the interesting thing about LSU this year is that very quietly, and nobody's talked about this because there's a million things to talk about right now.
Mm-hmm.
But the new defensive coordinator at LSU is Bo Pelini. Like,
right?
That's a huge hire.
And Bo does that well. He does.
That's Bo might not always be a great head coach, but he's a darn good defensive mind. And to put him there next to Edo, like that's an interesting combination. So I don't take LSU out of the conversation. Texas A&M, like you said, is probably the most stable out of any of the teams in the SEC West.
Mm-hmm.
Auburn still has Bo Nix.
Mm-hmm.
Like he's coming up, so there's some intriguing things there. We're still hopefully going to get an egg bowl with Kiffin and Leach if we make it that long into the season. So, you got those kind of wild cards floating around out.
We can only hope.
And so it's just like the SEC West is actually really interesting this year. I still think Alabama comes out on top, but it wouldn't stun me if we had, if Texas A&M snuck in there, that wouldn't stun me entirely. The SEC East is really Alabama and Florida, Georgia and Florida. Florida's offense started to look pretty good last year. Kyle Trask was settling in. I like what Dan Mullen's doing there. Georgia had to bring in a transfer quarterback for this year. So I'm going to give the edge to Florida. And because we only have 3 Power 5 teams, I think the SEC title game is Alabama, Florida, and it doesn't matter who wins. Mm-hmm. They're both in the playoff.
Okay.
So Florida is my third team in. And as much as I would like to say that, like, whoever is second in the SEC West sneaks in, I think the committee would want to have representation from the other Power 5 team if they're still playing at that point. And the Big 12 is going to be a hot freaking mess this year. We know that. Like, it's just who's going to win the Big 12 this year? Oklahoma doesn't have Jalen anymore, so they're looking for a new quarterback. Is this finally Texas's year? How many times do we have to ask that? But they've still got Sam Ehlinger.
True.
And they still have some really, really good ground game.
Mm-hmm.
That could be. Dave Aranda's an interesting hire at Baylor. Could Baylor be thrown into the mix with Dave Aranda? I don't know. I'm going to give the edge to Oklahoma because they're a known entity in Lincoln Riley. And so, sure, Oklahoma wins the Big 12. I've seen a lot. Bleacher Report actually predicted a 3-way tie for the Big 12 title between Oklahoma, Oklahoma State, and Texas, and that they all beat each other up, and by point differential, the Big 12 title game ends up being a rematch of Bedlam.
Okay.
So what the heck? Whoever wins the Big 12 gets in. We'll call it Oklahoma for now. So that's my 4: Clemson, Alabama, Florida, Oklahoma.
What would how would your top 4 be different if all of the Power 5 conferences were playing this year?
Oklahoma would be out for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Until the Big 12 can convince me that they can play defense, I think the Big 12 should be banned from the college football playoff. Because every year,
de facto kind of is. I mean, Oklahoma is the steady participant, but that seems to happen more often than not.
I think whoever wins, the Big Ten was going to be really interesting, and I hope we still get the season in January or November whenever we get it, because the Big Ten, we talked about this. Big Ten East is always interesting. Minnesota rising up in the West is fascinating and can upset the apple cart. Could Minnesota win the whole freaking conference? I think it's possible this year. I think they were on the verge of like being super competitive. Ohio State was still going to win the East. I don't see that being really in question. And so punt out Oklahoma, put in Ohio State. Heck, if Ohio State plays 4 games when they announce it, kick out Oklahoma and put in Ohio State. Right? I'd rather see a 3-0 Ohio State in the college football playoff than an 8-2 Oklahoma that's not going to play defense.
I would be for that too.
I had a hunch you might be. And then I don't know. I'd probably still keep both Alabama and Florida, and I think I'd probably still keep the top 2 teams out of the SEC, 1 out of each conference.
Okay.
So.
I do want. I asked you that because I preface my picks with this, and if this were a normal college football season, and everyone's playing college football, I would have Ohio State ranked no lower than second.
Yeah.
And given what we learned about going head to head with Clemson back in January, which and that was a catch for those of you who remember. An excellent chance. I would have them ranked number 1 right now. Got to find a running game. That's a big question, but I don't know. I would have Ohio State in the top 4 certainly. You think about Minnesota. You think about Penn State. If the season goes as I would anticipate, Penn State would have at least 1 loss. Wouldn't make it to a title game, but Penn State, man, they look really good. So my top 4 would be very different than it is now. My projected Final Four. But going with what we got, there's Clemson. There's Alabama.
Mm-hmm.
There is Florida, and that's a lights out defense and an improving offense. I think that gets them there, and I think you're right. That's Florida, Alabama, in the SEC title game, and the only thing that game matters for is the SEC title. I think they would both get in.
And seeding.
Yeah, sure. And then you mentioned Clemson playing an all ACC schedule. You know who else is going to benefit from that? Notre Dame.
Yep.
Because Notre Dame, it doesn't have its traditional schedule. All in the conference, or mostly in the conference. I don't know if they have any non-conference games or not. Their strength, the strength of the Irish is in the lines, both on both sides of the ball. A lot of experience. That's enough to protect a decent quarterback in Ian Book. It's enough to ensure they have a good running game. It's enough to ensure they can shut down the run. I wouldn't have Notre Dame in my top 4 in a normal 2020 season. But as we're going to make very clear, this whole thing, this is not a normal season. And I think they were, given this situation, I think they'd be in the Final Four.
We both despise Notre Dame. Like that's a known entity on this show.
Yes.
But I will go out and say, even after, 2 years ago when we had the "Please, for the love of God, somebody beat Notre Dame already" campaign.
Beat Notre Dame, yes.
I would still rather have Notre Dame in that potential playoff than a Big 12 team that won't play defense.
They're sort of carrying the torch for the Midwest right now.
Yeah.
Which it bothers me that's my reason for wanting them to do well. And I'm not sure that wanting them to do well is the correct is the right way to phrase that. But I think it's a very good team. The ACC schedule helps them out a bunch, and I think that's going to be give them a good shot at making the Final Four. So, but again, team, we have no idea. We have no idea, but we will see how that goes. And then there are actual college football games. I know there have been a couple actual college football games already, but these are actual college football games this weekend.
Yes,
and I am actually excited about them. We're going to start. This may be a name that people have used already. I had to look up the name of the river that goes between West Virginia and Kentucky. It is the Big Sandy River. We are going to call this the Big Sandy River Rivalry at 1 p.m. Saturday, Eastern Kentucky at Marshall. Marshall is favored by we have no idea because there's no line on this game because Eastern Kentucky is a 1AA team or whatever they call it these days. I would point out, however, that the ESPN matchup predictor is 95% Marshall. Just so we have a basis, a starting point here. Carla, what do you think?
Well, and not that this game was scheduled late or anything, but I can almost throw a stone back to the calendar when this game was put on the schedule, right? So
it's like they did 3 weeks, maybe
August 18th, less than 2 weeks ago. Okay. Less than 2 weeks ago, this game was put on the schedule. And I get it. Like like you said, these are two teams that are in really close proximity to each other. Like, what the heck? Why not? Let's play a game. So Eastern Kentucky had to do some research on them, which I shouldn't have had to do research on them because they play in the Ohio Valley Conference, and I should have known that. But there's been a lot of things going on in the world right now, and that was not high on my radar.
It's a little busy.
But yeah, the Eastern Kentucky Colonels is their mascot. I had to look that up. They play FCS in the Ohio Valley. This is a game if you happen to like the last name Wells. If your name is Wells, you're intrigued in this game
do well?
because maybe, although that's challenging because it's both sides of the equation here because the new Eastern Kentucky head coach is Walt Wells and the new quarterback at Marshall is Grant Wells.
Mm-hmm.
No idea if there's any relation. Didn't have enough time to go look that up. So anyhow, the Colonels, the reports say, because I know nothing about them, other than the fact that they play quite possibly the best named team in the FCS in their division in the Ohio Valley, which is just right up the road here in Tennessee, in Austin Peay, because they have the best chant ever, and you know what it is. Let's go Peay. I love my fellow Tennessee institutions. You're the best.
Yeah, why not? You got to.
So I was rooting for them the other night. I actually watched part of that game last Saturday because I just, it was football and local kids and what the heck, why not?
Yes.
I only made it about a quarter though. Sorry. But anyhow, Eastern Kentucky reports say that they're not much of a passing threat. They're a really run-heavy offense. They rushed for over 200 yards per game last year, so that's where they make their money on offense is through the run game. Marshall's defense is good, and it was good last year, and it should be good again this year, especially in the secondary. So if Eastern Kentucky is able to throw the ball at all, it's not going to matter because Marshall's secondary is really, really good. And Marshall's new quarterback, again, Grant Wells. But what's cool about it is, there's not a lot of information about this game, so I got to find out that Grant Wells is a local kid, and it's the first starting quarterback from the state of West Virginia in quite some time.
Okay.
And so it's kind of cool to see the local kid kind of, go to the school and become the starting quarterback. And like you said, my only other note on the game is the fact that ESPN had this as a 95% Marshall win. Anytime you get even a power or a group of 5 FBS opponent playing an FCS opponent, you root for the upset. We all think back to Appy State. I don't know. I think Marshall wins this game, but it might be entertaining. I mean, it two local teams could be fun to watch and a fun way to start a Saturday morning.
This actually was a rivalry in the 80s and early 90s when before Marshall made the jump to 1A. In those days, both Marshall and Eastern were kind of perpetual playoff teams, contenders for 1AA title. So they played. There was a stretch of almost 10 years where they played every single year. Marshall leads the series, but it's closer than you think. If you're thinking about D1 versus 1AA, FBS, FCS. I'm going to learn that someday.
Don't.
Yeah. But so the Marshall leads in the series, but it's 11-8 and 1 tie. So, it's a pretty close. It actually is a legit rivalry, which makes sense. I mean, the proximity. They're just it's a couple hours drive between the two schools. The thing. You mentioned Marshall's quarterback. I wanted to mention Marshall's running back, Brendan Knox. He rushed for almost 1,400 yards and over 5 a carry last season. He was the media picked him as the CUSA preseason MVP, and he is on Doak Walker Award watch lists. Marshall doesn't have a whole lot of experience at quarterback, but if they have a guy who can just kind of hand him the ball and get out of the way. I think that's going to be enough for Marshall to win this one pretty handily, hence the 95%. The big game for you and me anyway. We'll start. We're not going to watch a whole lot of the Big Sandy River rivalry because a half hour later on Saturday, 1:30 p.m. Saturday, Middle Tennessee State at Army. Army is favored by 3.5. I'm going to make it. Off the top of this, I'm gonna make it clear. No Ohio State, no Ohio University. Army's my team this year. Boom. Period. So, with that in mind, Carla, and you can explain whatever background you want about middle. But
I was gonna say, yeah. So I work at Middle.
yes.
So I have an affinity because some of I actually don't have nobody on the team is in any of my classes this semester, but
I was hoping you knew Asher O'Hara.
Asher O'Hara. No, I actually have never met him.
Okay.
Because he became starting quarterback and then pandemic hit in the spring, and so I didn't really ever get to meet some of the football players. I have a basketball player in one of my classes this semester.
Okay.
But anyhow, so I teach at Middle, and my team of preference, which is Ohio State or is Penn State, is also not playing this year, which means that Middle is now my primary team, because I went to Robert Morris and they're an FCS team and they're still playing some, I think. I'm not sure if they're playing a bunch.
I did not look. I included a Robert Morris mask in the intro. I don't know if you caught that or not, but I did. It's in there.
Is it? I'll have to go watch it again.
Yeah.
It was probably in the very end.
Yes, it was. It was one of the quick ones. Yes, but it's there.
Okay, I appreciate that. So I mean, and Robert Morris hasn't had a great football program for the last 4 or 5 years. I still catch them occasionally on TV, but no, Middle is my team this year, because the health of the football team is partially indicative of the health of our campus in general. And so yes, I would like to see.
A good point.
I would like to see the football succeed so that campus succeeds so that we continue to have a semester that's in all of our best interests. So yes, I am true blue this semester. It works really well that all of my teams are blue. Like I just changed shades. So I'm in royal blue now as opposed to being in my navy. But no, I mean, MTSU, I mean, yeah, the stock still legacy at quarterback ended last year, and Asher O'Hara took over as quarterback, and he had some growing pains, and Middle didn't have a great season last year. But gosh, that offense can be really fun to watch when they're clicking on all cylinders. Mm-hmm. Asher O'Hara is a true dual threat quarterback. He actually led the team in rushing last year, in addition to passing. And that offense can be really, really fun to watch. The problem with Middle last year is the fact that they couldn't stop anybody. They couldn't get off the field on defense. And then they couldn't convert third downs. Like that was those two things just lead to a losing season. And that's what happened. But now that you have a team that's gelled a little bit more, especially on offense, defense, they're still going to have some work. They have to replace. They lost 7 of their top 12 tacklers on defense, so that's not great for defense. But if they're having problems getting off the field, maybe that's not necessarily a bad thing. Mm-hmm. So there's still some growing pains there, but offensively, I think we're going to see some real strides forward for Middle on offense this year. Now that Asher's gotten a year under his belt. Army runs the football. We know this, right? Yes. We don't have to talk about that too much. Yep. Last year Army was 3rd in the nation in rushing, but it was actually disappointing because they didn't cross 4,000 yards for the first time in like 4 years. Right. And that's a big deal to them when they are primarily running the football. So, and they didn't have a great season by Army standards because they weren't quite as successful in running the ball as they have been in the past. They also have a lot of turnover on the defensive line. They don't have much of a pass rush coming back. They lost kind of their best pass rushers, which is interesting when you're facing a team that has a dual threat quarterback that likes to run. Right. There's some advantage there for Middle if they can establish Asher as being able to move out of the pocket and kind of run or throw or whatever he wants to do. Give him some motion. If Army can't get back into the backfield, I think there's advantage Middle. And 3 of Army's top 4 tacklers are now off, graduated or on to other things. And so the line in this game is really close. Line's only 3.5. Right. Middle's on the road, but other than the travel time, does that matter?
Right. What is home field advantage these days?
Yeah, there's not really a home field advantage other than the fact that you have to travel to get there. Of course, I'm going to say Middle's going to win this game. They need a win. They need a statement win to start the season. And even if Army wins, and they're not going to, but even if Army wins, this game's going to be a lot closer than I think a lot of people expected, because I think Middle's going to be able to hang with them with that offense. And it's going to be a lot closer because the home field advantage is wiped off the board. So Middle in an upset.
Okay. Okay. This is a really interesting game, and it could be a lot of fun. I'm intrigued by Asher O'Hara. As I looked at the ESPN's list of the results from last season, obviously he's leading the team in passing every game, but then it's O'Hara, leading the team in rushing as well. I'm like, well, okay, that can be a difficult thing to defend if you don't know what the guy's going to do. And what is Army's weakness? At least was it last year? It was defense. So that presents a real challenge. I will say off the top, yes, I'm picking Army because this Army is my team this year. But they have to bounce back from a rough season. They lost to the other two service academies. Probably the highlight of the season, I think, without question, is taking Michigan to overtime, which is always something that's near and dear to my heart. They need. This is an odd thing to say about Army, but they need to pass the ball better. They don't have to pass the ball much, but in terms of improving the offense, third in the country in rushing, you'd expect them to be there, but you've got to be able to hit a play action pass just once in a while, to keep defenses honest, and that really opens things up. And the defense doesn't have to be lights out either. The defense, Army wants to slow the game down. Army wants to run and run and run and run, and if Army can score one touchdown per quarter and hold you to one touchdown per half, that's like the perfect game plan for the Black Knights. I think Army's offense can accomplish that. They're going to run the ball well. They always do. Yeah. If they can pass the ball a little bit better, offense is in great shape. So the question is the defense, and this is a challenge with a quarterback, a dual threat quarterback like O'Hara. That's going to be a tough thing for them to deal with off the top. I'm going to say, because football games for cadets at West Point, football games are a relief. Football games are the low pressure point of the week. So I'm going to say they handle the challenge of defending Asher O'Hara in the game on Saturday and beat the Raiders in what should be a really fun, really tight game. So there we go. We've already taken care of rivalry week, right? There it is.
Dang it! In week one, or week 0, whatever this is.
We're calling this week 1. I don't know what or maybe we should call this week 2 since we already did one this summer. I don't know. We'll figure that out. Prime time on Monday, 8 p.m. Brigham Young at Navy. And this is interesting. Brigham Young is favored by Las Vegas by 1.5. ESPN matchup says almost 78% Navy. So, Carla, what do you think?
So this is another one of those replacement games, yes. Right? And I had to go look this up. This game was announced on August 6th. So I think there's, and funny that we spent a good portion of the top of the show talking about Notre Dame playing in the ACC because this was supposed to be Notre Dame Navy. Yes. And so I think there's a piece of that could come into play here with the somewhat of a letdown factor for Navy. As I saw a lot of articles about that on how is Navy going to be disappointed if they're not playing Notre Dame, right in a primetime slot, because that's what this game was supposed to be, and
in Ireland, if I remember correctly,
So there's some letdown there, and what's Navy's mentality. It's fun that we're talking about both, 2 of the 3 service academies in the first week of the show. Because Navy, if I have to choose a service academy, it's Navy. Because that's how my dad was in the Navy. So I've been a Go Navy Beat Army for my entire upbringing. Sorry. Not
You're
really.
Not sorry.
I'm not sorry. Go Navy, beat Army. But the last time I watched Navy, I have a bone to pick with Navy because the last time I watched Navy, I had picked them in Bullapalooza to watch the Liberty Bowl, and Navy made me late for my New Year's Eve dinner. because I stayed at home and watched the end of the Liberty Bowl, because that was the time they called like all three, like Kansas State called all three of their timeouts to try to ice the Navy kicker, and then they kicked it and won the game. And we had dinner reservations.
Right. I didn't know about this. This is hysterical.
And so this was the last time that I watched Navy. And of course, then the other thing I wrote down in my notes was, remember going out to dinner?
Where did you go out to dinner?
It was a place called Port Belly Farmhouse down in Nolensville, Tennessee. It was it was a very quiet New Year's Eve, because we're not big New Year's Eve partiers. So we went for a very nice farm to table dinner, relatively early, in the, like, it was a 7:00 reservation. So it wasn't, crazy late or whatever. Right. And we had a lovely dinner, and then we came home and opened a bottle of champagne and watched the crazies on TV in Times Square. Like, that was
watched Amateur Hour on Times Square. Yes.
I mean, that's what we do on New Year's Eve.
That sounds like a great New Year's Eve, actually.
It was lovely. Yeah, it was a really good meal.
Okay.
And so yeah, if you're ever in Nashville, south of Nashville, Nolensville, Tennessee, Port Belly Farmhouse, highly recommend.
Noted.
Anyhow, so that was the last time I watched Navy. Story time with Carla.
I mean, at least they didn't like disrupt dinner too much.
Not too much. We were only 5 minutes late. It wasn't bad.
Oh, see, that's not fair.
I was getting dressed, like, well, not that that place was fancy, but like I was changing out of like lounge clothes into something appropriate to wear for dinner, like during timeouts.
You can't wear sweats out on New Year's Eve.
On New Year's Eve, no. But I was definitely like changing during the timeouts. Because like, really, they're gonna call another timeout. Okay, I'm gonna go put eyeshadow on. So yeah. Anyhow, Navy doesn't have Malcolm Perry anymore.
And that's a significant thing.
That's a huge thing. And like, literally, I could end my preview of Navy by just saying that Malcolm Perry has graduated. His eligibility is up.
And then you go back to, you have no idea.
Right. Yeah. So apparently the starter should be Dalen Morris, a senior. Reports say he can, quote, throw the ball, which is kind of a big deal for Navy. Because I think in the Liberty Bowl, Perry only had like 2 passing attempts, and the largest pass of the game was a trick play that was thrown by the halfback. It wasn't even thrown by Perry. So Navy is even worse about the whole not passing the ball thing than Army is. Like, right. Navy just does not pass the ball. They run the triple option, and of course, think about a BYU team facing the triple option in week 1 is just like, oh my gosh, what. And for teams that haven't had a lot of fall practice, you know, I mean, that's a huge ask. And to fly all the way across the country, but to play in an empty stadium in Annapolis against a team that runs the triple option with a quarterback that you've never really seen on film. Go have fun, Cougars. What do you do? And Navy's gutsy. Like, that's the thing that we love about Coach Ken is, like, I mean, the trick play, essentially the halfback pass, like, won them the Liberty Bowl because it got them down the field. And he's not afraid to roll the dice and go for it on 4th down. Like, he's proven that time and time again. So you've got a gutsy Navy team that really has nothing to lose. Nobody really knows what they're going to look like without Perry. And so, and they're playing at home. Not that that matters, but at least they're not traveling. Right. BYU, I mean, their big thing is it's anytime you play the triple option, stay disciplined on defense. You know, stay in your lane, and that's hard to do against the triple option. BYU has a new starting quarterback. Or not new, he's returning, but he was just named the starter literally yesterday. No pressure kid. Zach Wilson named the starter on Monday. And he was he's had only, nearly 4,000 career passing yards. He's had a successful career at BYU. Had an injury set him back last year. But he will be the starter. BYU struggled in the red zone last year. They just couldn't put the ball in the end zone. And they need to get off the field on defense. We've talked about that a lot. They just give up 3rd downs and make, third manageable is a terrible situation to be when you're a defense, and it's a great place to be when you're an offense. And BYU just had that problem. They just couldn't get off the field on 3rd down. There's so many storylines in this game. I didn't even write them all down. Like, the coaching staffs know each other. Like, the Navy head coach was actually offered the job at BYU and then turned it down to stay at Navy. And so like there's this weird like coaching tree like intermingling between these two teams. So this is gonna be a fun game to watch. Anytime I love watching Navy play, just because I love watching old school triple option.
Sure.
Be fun to see it with a new quarterback. Yeah, I'm gonna say Navy just because why not? Even though this is a game that, like, again, we don't have any idea. There's so many unknowns with both these teams, but I'm going to say, what the heck? Navy's playing at home. Go Navy, beat BYU. That doesn't roll off the tongue.
It does not. It does not. There are too many syllables on there, but yeah. You mentioned Zach Wilson, BYU's quarterback. Pardon me. The thing that you wonder is, does he have anybody to throw the ball to? The top three starting receivers from BYU all graduated. He gets back starting tight end Matt Bushman, who's been a 3-year starter. So that's a significant thing. And then one of the receivers who should be on the field a whole bunch is Gunnar Romney. And because we're talking about Brigham Young University, he is a nephew of Mitt Romney. Navy, you mentioned no Malcolm Perry. I don't want to say Malcolm Perry was a talent. He was not a system quarterback. I think Navy can get by with a system quarterback because of Coach Ken's system. And I love that you referred to him as Coach Ken, so neither of us had to worry about
saying his last name,
to pronounce his last name.
Yep.
Because I didn't even bother writing it down. It's like Coach Ken. I can rely, but if Navy can rely on Coach Ken's system, and especially if the defense can slow down the Cougars just a bit. Again, as I said with Army, don't have to be lights out, but the offense will slow down the game. And this is a game that I think Navy can win this. I honestly do not understand the line other than just sort of reputation. I think this is maybe not an easy win for Navy, but I think an obvious win for Navy. How's that sound?
I'll take that.
Boys and girls, you can hear the Carla and Crappy Show on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, whatever Google service is called these days, Stitcher, TuneIn, and a variety of other podcasting hosts. You can watch us on YouTube and on the show's Facebook page. If you like us, please subscribe, rate, and review. If you don't, mind your own damn business. There's something else in this tagline that I don't remember, but I said it every single week last year, and I can't. What was it?
To come back next week to see exactly how wrong we were.
Well, yeah, that's and be sure to come back next week and see exactly how wrong we were. Carla, any final thoughts?
After 9 years, we forgot the tag?
I've only been doing the tag for like 2. The tag started when I started doing the audio podcast. So, and that's not as I'm not as and I have no idea what season it is anyway. So, you know.
It's like season 9.5, or like, is that what happens? Like if the Big Ten and the Pac-12 decide to play in January, is that season 9.5?
Oh God, do we do more shows? If there are,
we have to. It's the Big Ten.
Wow,
that's our thing.
I didn't even thought about that. Okay, yeah, I'm in. We got to. Is that your final thought?
I guess, because there's not a whole. I don't know any of the other games happening this weekend. Like.
Trust me, these are the 3 most significant games this weekend. There are Power 5 teams playing next weekend, and we are going to come back and talk about them because that's what we do. What's going to happen beyond that? Carla and I will shrug at the same time. We have no idea. But for right now, we have college football games. And we are college football fans, and we are going to enjoy the college football games that have been put in front of us, regardless of the circumstances.
Yes.
Carla, here we go for season 9, whatever it brings. I'm happy to be doing this again, and I'm happy that you're doing this with me.
Yeah.
Boys and girls, I am happy that you are listening to us as well. This is going to be a season like we have never seen, and we're going to stick with it for as long as we need to. Cheers, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll talk to you next week.
Cheers.